I never knew my parents. For as long as I can remember, the grey walls of St. Catherine's Orphanage in Portland, Maine, were the only home I had. My name is Emma Hartford, and when I turned 23, I was forced to leave the only place I'd ever known with nothing but a worn backpack, $47 in my pocket, and a rusty old barn key that Sister Margaret pressed into my palm on my last day there. "Your mother left this with you when she brought you to us," Sister Margaret said, her wrinkled hands trembling as she held mine. "I was supposed to give it to you when you turned 18, but honestly, Emma, I forgot about it until I was cleaning out the old records room last week. I'm so sorry, dear. I don't know what it opens, or if it even matters anymore, but it was hers, and now it's yours." I stared at the key, feeling its weight in my hand. It was old, covered in rust spots, with a strange octagonal head and a long shaft with intricate teeth. There was a small tag attached to it with a piece of string, so faded I could barely make out the words written in blue ink. "Riverside Barn, County Road 47, Brookfield." "Brookfield?" I asked Sister Margaret. "Where's that?" She shook her head slowly. "I have no idea, child. Could be anywhere. Could be in Maine, could be in another state entirely. Your mother didn't leave much information when she brought you here. Just a first name, Sarah, and this key. She was very young, very scared. She said she'd come back for you, but—" Her voice trailed off, and I knew how that sentence ended. She never came back. Standing outside St. Catherine's that cold March morning, watching the only home I'd ever known disappear behind me as I walked down the cracked sidewalk, I felt more alone than ever. The other kids who'd aged out had family, friends, somewhere to go. I had a $47, a backpack with 3 changes of clothes, and a key to a barn that might not even exist anymore. I spent my first night of freedom in a women's shelter downtown. The woman at the desk, a kind soul named Patricia, with bright red hair and compassionate eyes, let me use the computer in the common room after dinner. I searched for Riverside Barn, County Road 47, Brookfield, and held my breath as the results loaded. My heart nearly stopped when I saw it. Brookfield, Vermont, a small town about 200 miles from Portland. And there, in an old property records database, was a listing for a barn on County Road 47, listed under the name Hartford Property Trust. My last name, Hartford. Sister Margaret had told me that my mother said my father's name was James Hartford, but she'd never been able to track him down. I spent the next 3 days working odd jobs, anything I could find that paid cash. I cleaned tables at a diner, helped a guy move furniture, stood on a corner holding a sign for a tax preparation service. By the end of those 3 days, I had scraped together $215. It was enough for a bus ticket to Brookfield and maybe a few meals. The bus ride took 6 hours. I pressed my face against the window, watching the landscape change from city to suburbs to rolling farmland covered in the last patches of winter snow. The key felt heavy in my jacket pocket, like it was pulling me forward, demanding answers to questions I'd had my entire life. Brookfield was the kind of town you see in movies, the kind I'd always dreamed about when I was stuck in my small room at St. Catherine's. A main street with brick buildings, a white church with a tall steeple, houses with wide porches and painted shutters. It was beautiful and peaceful, and I felt like an outsider the moment I stepped off the bus. I found a small cafe called Maggie's Place, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a cup of coffee and a muffin, trying to make it last as long as possible, while I figured out my next move. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a name tag that said Maggie, noticed me studying a map of the area I'd grabbed from the bus station. "You lost, honey?" she asked, refilling my coffee cup without me asking. "Sort of," I admitted. "I'm looking for County Road 47. There's supposed to be a barn out there, the Riverside Barn." Maggie's expression changed, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "The old Hartford place? That property's been abandoned for years. Nobody's been out there since, must be 25 years now. Why are you looking for it?" My hand instinctively went to my pocket, touching the key through the fabric. "It's complicated. Do you know how to get there?" She studied me for a long moment, and I could see her making calculations, trying to figure out who I was and what my story might be. "It's about 3 miles out of town, past the old covered bridge. Take Route 12 north, then turn right on County Road 47. You can't miss it, it's the only barn still standing out that way. But honey, I gotta warn you, that place is falling apart. Been empty since the Hartford family. Well, since they had their troubles." "What kind of troubles?" I asked, leaning forward. Maggie glanced around the cafe, which was mostly empty, except for an elderly couple in the corner. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me, lowering her voice. "James Hartford was a good man, owned a successful construction company. He and his wife Linda lived in the farmhouse next to that barn. They had a daughter, but she ran off when she was just 16 or 17, caused quite a scandal. James never got over it. He died about 15 years ago. Linda passed a few years before that. The property went into some kind of trust, but nobody ever came to claim it. The house burned down about 10 years back. Electrical fire, they said, but the barn's still standing. Why are you really looking for it, sweetheart?" I pulled out the key and placed it on the table between us. "Because I think that daughter might have been my mother. And I think this key opens something in that barn." Maggie's eyes widened as she stared at the key, then back at me, then at the key again. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're Sarah's daughter? Sarah Hartford's daughter?" Hearing someone say my mother's name like that, like she was a real person who had existed in this town, who had walked these streets, made something crack open inside my chest. "You knew her? Knew her?" "Honey, everyone in this town knew Sarah Hartford. She was a firecracker, that one. Beautiful girl, dark hair like yours, same green eyes too. She was the star of the high school drama club, always talking about going to New York to become an actress. But then she got mixed up with some boy from the city, nobody knows who, and she just disappeared one night. Left a note saying she was leaving and not to look for her. James and Linda were devastated. They never stopped hoping she'd come back." Maggie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "How old are you, sweetheart?" 23. I was born in September 1991. Maggie did the math in her head, nodding slowly. "That fits. Sarah left in early 91, right after New Year's. She would have been about 4 months pregnant when she ran. Oh, those poor people. They had a grandchild and never knew it. The weight of all those lost years, all those missed connections, settled over me like a heavy blanket. My grandparents had been right here, in this town, and they died, never knowing I existed. My mother had run away, given birth to me, left me at an orphanage, and disappeared. The anger I'd always carried mixed with a new emotion, something deeper and more painful, grief for people I'd never known. "The barn," I said, trying to focus. "Can you take me there, or at least point me in the right direction?" Maggie checked her watch. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. I'll drive you out there myself. But Emma, I need you to prepare yourself. That place has been empty for a long time. Whatever you're hoping to find, it might not be there anymore. The barn could be empty or full of nothing but old farm equipment and bird nests." Those 20 minutes felt like hours. I sat at that table drinking coffee I didn't taste, watching the clock on the wall tick forward with agonizing slowness. Maggie brought me a sandwich without charging me for it, saying I looked too thin and needed to eat. She was right. I'd been rationing my money so carefully that I'd barely eaten anything substantial in days. When her shift finally ended, Maggie led me out to her truck, an old blue pickup that had seen better days but ran smoothly. We drove through the town, and she pointed out landmarks as we went. "That's where the high school is. That's where Sarah would have gone. That white house on the corner, that was the Hartford's place before they moved out to the farm. James sold it after Linda died, said it had too many memories. We left the main part of town behind and drove through increasingly rural landscape. The covered bridge Maggie had mentioned was beautiful, a red wooden structure spanning a half-frozen river. Beyond it, County Road 47 was barely more than a dirt road, rutted and muddy from the spring thaw. "It's just up here," Maggie said, slowing down. "See that stand of pine trees? The barn is just past that." And then I saw it. A massive red barn, weathered and faded to a rusty brown, sitting in the middle of an overgrown field. The roof sagged in places, and several boards were missing from the sides, but it was still standing, still solid. Behind where the barn stood, I could see the blackened foundation of what must have been the farmhouse, overgrown with weeds and small trees. Maggie pulled the truck up to the barn's main doors, and we both got out. The wind was cold, whipping across the empty field and cutting through my thin jacket. Up close, the barn was even bigger than I'd thought, easily 40 feet tall, with huge double doors that were chained shut with a padlock so rusted I wasn't sure it would even open. "That's not going to be your key," Maggie said, gesturing to the padlock. "That's been there forever." But I was already moving around the side of the barn, running my hand along the weathered wood, looking for another entrance. And there, on the east side, partially hidden by overgrown bushes, I found it. A smaller door, human-sized, with a lock that matched my key perfectly. The octagonal head, the long shaft, even the patina of age matched exactly. My hands were shaking as I pulled the key from my pocket. "This is it," I breathed. Maggie came up beside me, her presence solid and reassuring. "You want me to wait in the truck? Give you some privacy?" "No," I said quickly. "Please stay. I don't know what's in there, and I don't want to be alone." She nodded and put her hand on my shoulder as I fitted the key into the lock. It was stiff, so stiff I thought it wouldn't turn, but I put pressure on it, wiggling it slightly, and suddenly I felt something give. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet field. I pulled the lock off and pushed the door. It resisted at first, the hinges screaming in protest, but then it swung open, and I was looking into the dim interior of the barn. Daylight streamed through the gaps in the walls and the holes in the roof, creating shafts of light that illuminated dust motes floating in the air. The smell hit me immediately, old hay, wood, and something else, something like dust and time and secrets. The main floor of the barn was mostly empty, just old farm equipment like Maggie had predicted. A rusted tractor in one corner, some tools hanging on the walls, piles of rotting hay bales. But then I saw the ladder, leading up to a loft area at the back of the barn. "Stay here," I told Maggie, though I was grateful she ignored me and followed right behind as I crossed the barn floor, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. The ladder was wooden and old, but when I tested it, it seemed solid enough. I climbed slowly, carefully, with Maggie waiting at the bottom, ready to catch me if I fell. The loft was darker than the main floor, with only a few cracks in the walls letting in light. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that this space was different. This was where someone had lived, or at least spent significant time. There was an old mattress in one corner, covered with a faded sleeping bag, a small table with a kerosene lamp, boxes stacked against the walls. And there, hanging on a nail, was a picture frame. I walked over to it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The photograph was faded but clear enough. A teenage girl with long dark hair and green eyes, wearing a drama club costume, smiling at the camera with a joy that seemed to radiate off the paper. She looked so much like me, it was like looking in a mirror. And written on the bottom of the frame in neat handwriting were the words, "Sarah Hartford, age 16, A Midsummer Night's Dream, 1989. "Oh, honey," Maggie said softly from behind me. She'd climbed up the ladder without me noticing. "That's her. That's your mama." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, holding the frame, staring at the face of the woman who had given birth to me and then disappeared. The woman who had left me this key, this breadcrumb trail to follow. But there was more. So much more. The boxes against the wall were full of things. I knelt down and opened the first one with trembling hands. Inside were journals, dozens of them, spiral-bound notebooks with dates written on the covers. I pulled out the one on top. The date read January 1991. I opened it to the first page and began to read. January 3rd, 1991. I'm pregnant. I'm 16 years old and I'm pregnant and I can't tell my parents because they'll be so disappointed in me. Marcus said he loved me, But when I told him, he said I was lying, that it wasn't his, and he stopped returning my calls. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Hey there, friend. If you've made it this far in Emma's story, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt lost, like you were searching for answers about where you came from or who you really are? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community here of people who believe that everyone deserves to know their story, and I don't want you to miss what Emma discovers next. Trust me, what's in those journals is going to change everything. Now let's get back to the story, because what Emma finds next made me literally gasp out loud when I first heard this. I sat down on the dusty floor of the loft, my back against one of the support beams, and continued reading. Maggie sat beside me, quietly offering her presence as support, while I dove into my mother's words, written 23 years ago when she was younger than I was now. January 15th, 1991. I've been sneaking out to the barn every night after Mom and Dad go to sleep. They think I'm in my room studying. I've been bringing supplies up here, making it comfortable. I need a place to think, to plan. I'm showing now, just a little, but I can hide it with baggy sweaters. I have about 4 months before it becomes obvious. I need to figure out what I'm going to do before then. I can't have this baby here. Everyone in town will know, everyone will talk. Mom and Dad will never forgive me for ruining their reputation. February the 2nd, 1991. I stole $200 from Dad's wallet today. I feel terrible about it, but I need money if I'm going to leave. I've been researching places I can go, cities where nobody knows me. Portland seems like the best option. It's big enough that I can disappear, but close enough that maybe, someday, if things work out, I can come back. I found information about a home for unwed mothers there. They'll help me through the pregnancy and help me place the baby for adoption. I know I can't keep it. I'm 16. I have nothing. What kind of life could I give a baby? March 8th, 1991. I leave tonight. I've packed a bag and hidden it here in the barn. I wrote a note to Mom and Dad. I tried to explain, but how do you explain something like this? How do you tell the people who love you most in the world that you're throwing away everything they've given you because you made one stupid mistake? I told them not to look for me, that I need to do this alone. I left the note on my bed. By the time they find it tomorrow morning, I'll be on a bus to Portland. I'm taking the key to this barn with me. Someday, when I get my life together, when I'm someone worthy of being found, I'll come back and get all the things I'm leaving here. All my journals, my photos, my memories of being Sarah Hartford before everything fell apart. But for now, I have to go. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. This was my mother's voice, her thoughts, her fears. She had been so young, so terrified, so alone, just like I'd been my whole life. I set that journal aside and picked up another one, this one dated September 1991, the month I was born. September 18th, 1991. I had a baby girl today. They let me hold her for about an hour before they took her away. She has dark hair like mine, and the tiniest fingers I've ever seen. I counted all 10 of them, all 10 toes. She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect, and I'm giving her away. The social worker at St. Catherine's orphanage promised me she'd find a good family for her, people who can give her everything I can't. I signed the papers. I gave them my last name for her, Hartford, because even though I can't raise her, I want her to have that connection to where she came from. I gave them this key and told them to give it to her when she turned 18. I know it's not much, but it's all I have. Maybe someday she'll come here and find these journals and understand why I had to do this. Maybe someday she'll forgive me. Tears were streaming down my face now, falling onto the pages and smudging the ink that was already faded with age. Maggie had her arm around my shoulders, and she was crying too. September 25th, 1991. I went back to the orphanage today. I stood across the street and watched the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. I know it's stupid. I know it just makes everything harder. But I couldn't help myself. I named her in my heart. Emma. I don't know if they'll keep that name, but that's what I call her when I think about her. Emma Hartford. I wonder what kind of life she'll have. I hope it's better than anything I could have given her. October 10th, 1991. I got a job at a diner downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's enough for a room in a boarding house. I'm trying to build a life here, trying to figure out who Sarah Hartford is now that she's not anyone's daughter and not anyone's mother. I think about going back to Brookfield sometimes, but I can't face my parents after what I've done. I can't face that town. I called home once from a payphone, just to hear Mum's voice. She answered and I almost spoke, but then I hung up. It's better this way. They're better off without me. I flipped through more journals, watching my mother's life unfold in scattered entries over the years. She worked various jobs, always struggling. She got her GED. She tried to go to community college, but had to drop out because she couldn't afford it. She had a few relationships, but none of them lasted. She thought about me constantly. Almost every entry mentioned me in some way. Emma's first birthday today. I wonder if anyone celebrated with her. I wonder if she's walking yet. I bought a cupcake and put a candle in it, sang happy birthday to her in my empty room. I'm pathetic. Emma should be starting kindergarten this year. I wonder what she looks like now. Does she still have dark hair? Does she have my eyes or her father's? Does she ever wonder about me? Emma is 10 today, double digits. I've been saving money, just a little bit each month. I have almost $3,000 now. I keep thinking I should go back to Brookfield, get the journals from the barn, take them to her somehow. But what if she doesn't want to know me? What if showing up in her life just makes everything worse? Then there was a gap. No entries for several years. The next journal I picked up was dated 2003, and the handwriting was different, shaky, harder to read. March 3rd, 2003. The doctor confirmed it today. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He said 6 months, maybe less. I'm 34 years old and I'm dying. Emma is 11 now, almost 12. I'll never see her graduate high school. I'll never see her get married or have children of her own. I'll never get to explain to her why I did what I did. I need to write her a letter. I need to leave something more than these journals. I need her to know that giving her up was the hardest thing I ever did, and that I thought about her every single day of my life. I frantically searched through the boxes, looking for that letter. There had to be a letter. She said she was going to write me a letter. My hands were shaking as I pulled out papers, old photographs, mementos from her life. And then, in the very bottom of the last box, in an envelope with my name written on it, in that same shaky handwriting, I found it. The envelope was sealed. I stared at it for a long moment, almost afraid to open it. This was the last thing my mother had ever said to me. Once I read it, that would be it. There would be nothing else. Maggie squeezed my shoulder gently. Take your time, honey, there's no rush. But there was a rush. I'd waited 23 years for this. I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out several pages of lined paper, covered front and back with my mother's writing. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then you found the barn. You found the key I left with you at St. Catherine's, and you were brave enough to follow it here. I'm so proud of you already, and I haven't even met you. I'm writing this letter in March of 2003. The doctors tell me I have about 6 months left to live. I have cancer, and there's nothing they can do. I should be sad about dying so young, but mostly I'm just sad that I'll never get to know you. I want to tell you about your father first, because I'm sure you've wondered. His name was Marcus Chen. He was 19, visiting Brookfield for the summer, staying with his aunt who lived on the edge of town. I was 16 and stupid, and so in love I couldn't see straight. We spent that whole summer together, and I really believed he loved me too. But when I told him I was pregnant, he said cruel things. He said I was trying to trap him, that the baby probably wasn't even his. He left town the next day, and I never saw him again. I tried to find him years later, but his aunt had passed away and I had no way to track him down. I don't even know if he's still alive. I'm sorry I can't give you more than that. I want to explain why I left you at the orphanage. People might tell you I abandoned you, and I guess in a way I did. But Emma, I was 16 years old with no money, no education, no way to support a baby. My parents were good people, but I was too ashamed to tell them what had happened. I thought if I had you and tried to raise you myself, we'd both end up living in poverty, struggling, and I wanted so much more for you than that. I thought the orphanage would find you a loving family quickly, people who could give you the life you deserved. I never imagined you'd grow up there. If I had known, maybe I would have made different choices. I don't know. I'd like to think I would have been brave enough to come back for you, but honestly, I don't know if that's true. I've lived a small life, Emma. I worked minimum wage jobs, lived in cheap apartments, never married, never had more children. I've been alone most of my adult life, and it's the life I chose when I ran away from Brookfield, but I need you to know that you were never far from my thoughts. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I imagined you reaching, I thought about you. I wondered what you looked like, what kind of person you were becoming, if you were happy. There's something else I need to tell you, something important. When my father, your grandfather, James Hartford, died in 1998, he left everything to me in his will. The farm, his construction business, his savings, all of it. The lawyer tried to find me for years, but I was so good at staying hidden that they couldn't track me down. Eventually, everything went into a trust with instructions that if I was ever found, or if any heirs came forward with proof of their identity, they would inherit everything. Emma, I'm one of those heirs. You're James Hartford's granddaughter, and if you're reading this letter, then you've already proven it by finding this barn, with the key only I could have given you. I had to stop reading for a moment. The words were blurring together, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. An inheritance. My grandfather had left everything to my mother, and now it was supposed to go to me. Maggie leaned over to look at the letter, her eyes wide. Oh my God, Emma! Do you know what this means? I shook my head, unable to speak, and continued reading. The lawyer's name is Robert Whitmore. His office is in Brookfield, right on Main Street. You can't miss it. I've enclosed a copy of my birth certificate, which should be in this box somewhere, along with photos of me and documentation that proves I'm Sarah Hartford, daughter of James and Linda Hartford. Your birth certificate from St. Catherine's will prove you're my daughter. Together, those documents should be enough to claim what's rightfully yours. I need to tell you what you'll be inheriting, so you understand. The farm itself is about 70 acres. The house burned down years ago, but the land is valuable. My father's construction company, Hartford Building Solutions, was successful. When he died, it was sold, but the proceeds, about $450,000, went into the trust. There were also savings accounts, investments, and the sale of my parents' house in town. Altogether, the trust should be worth somewhere around $800,000, maybe more with interest over the years. Emma, this money could change your life. You could go to college, buy a house, start a business, do whatever you've dreamed of doing. You could have the security and stability I never had. You could have choices. But more than the money, I want you to have something else. In this barn, in these boxes, is the story of who you come from. Your grandfather James was a good man. He built houses for people who couldn't afford them, always charged fair prices, treated his workers well. Your grandmother Linda was a teacher. She loved books and gardening and made the best apple pie in 3 counties. They loved me so much, and I broke their hearts when I left. They would have loved you too, Emma. They would have been so proud to have you as their granddaughter. I wish I could have been a better mother to you. I wish I could have been brave enough to keep you, or at least brave enough to come back for you once I got on my feet. But I was scared and ashamed, and by the time I realized I'd made a terrible mistake, years had passed, and I didn't know how to fix it. I told myself you were better off without me, that my absence was actually a gift because I had nothing to offer you but my own brokenness. I'm dying now, and I have so many regrets. But the biggest one is that I never got to know you. I never got to hear your voice or see your smile or know what kind of person you became. I hope you're strong. I hope you're brave. I hope you've had people in your life who loved you the way you deserve to be loved. If you're angry with me, I understand. You have every right to be. I made selfish choices that affected your entire life, but please know that I loved you. From the moment I felt you move inside me, from the hour I held you after you were born, until this very moment as I write these words, I have loved you with everything I am. You were not a mistake, Emma. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I wasn't strong enough to do right by you. Live the life I couldn't live. Be brave in ways I wasn't brave. Take this inheritance and build something beautiful with it. And maybe, sometimes, think of me kindly. I love you, my darling girl. I always have. I always will. Your mother, Sarah Hartford. P.S. There's one more thing in these boxes. At the very bottom of the box with the red lid, wrapped in tissue paper, is a silver locket. It belonged to your grandmother, Linda. She wore it every day until she died. Inside is a picture of her and your grandfather on their wedding day. I took it from the house before I left Brookfield because I wanted something of theirs with me always. I want you to have it now. When you wear it, you'll carry your grandparents close to your heart, the way I've carried you close to mine. The letter ended there. I folded it carefully, my hands trembling, and set it aside. Then I searched through the boxes until I found the one with the red lid. Just as she'd said, at the very bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, faded but clear. A young couple on their wedding day, so happy, so full of hope for the future. My grandparents, people I would never meet, but who had loved my mother and would have loved me if they'd been given the chance. Maggie helped me fasten the locket around my neck. It sat right against my heart, exactly where it belonged. "What are you going to do?" Maggie asked softly. "I'm going to see the lawyer," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm going to claim what my mother wanted me to have." Robert Whitmore's office was exactly where my mother said it would be. A small brick building on Main Street with his name on a brass plaque beside the door. Maggie drove me there directly from the barn, and I walked in carrying a box full of documents, my birth certificate from St. Catherine's, clutched in one hand. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain, looked up when I entered. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Mr. Whitmore." "It's about the Hartford estate." Her eyebrows rose. "The Hartford estate? That case has been dormant for over 20 years. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me. My name is Emma Hartford. I'm Sarah Hartford's daughter." The receptionist's mouth fell open. She stared at me for a long moment, then stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Please, wait right here. I'll get Mr. Whitmore immediately." She disappeared through a door behind her desk, and I could hear urgent, hushed voices. Less than a minute later, a man emerged. He was in his 70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at me as if he was seeing a ghost. "Dear God," he whispered, "you look just like her, just like Sarah when she was young." He seemed to collect himself, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Whitmore. I was your grandfather's attorney, and I've been the trustee of his estate since his death. Please, come into my office. We have a lot to discuss." His office was lined with law books and had a large mahogany desk covered in neat stacks of papers. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk, then settled into his own chair with a heavy sigh. "I've been hoping someone would walk through that door for 27 years, he said. "After your grandfather died and we couldn't locate Sarah, the estate went into trust with very specific instructions. James Hartford was adamant that everything should go to his daughter or her heirs if she couldn't be found. We searched for years, hired private investigators, checked every database we could access, but Sarah had vanished completely. She didn't want to be found. She died," I said quietly. "In 2003, cancer. She was 34. Mr. Whitmore's face fell. "I'm so sorry. She was just a girl when I knew her. Bright, talented, full of life. Your grandparents were devastated when she left." He paused, studying me carefully. "You said you're her daughter?" I opened the box and began laying out documents on his desk. My birth certificate from St. Catherine's, showing I was born Emma Hartford on September 18, 1991. Mother listed as Sarah Hartford, father unknown. The letter my mother had written. Her birth certificate proving she was Sarah Hartford, daughter of James and Linda Hartford. Photographs of her throughout her life. The journals documenting everything from her pregnancy to her death. Mr. Whitmore examined each document carefully, his expression growing more emotional as he read my mother's letter. When he finished, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "This is extraordinary," he said. "I never imagined. We knew there was a possibility Sarah might have had children, but we had no way to find them. Emma, these documents are more than sufficient to prove your claim. You are unquestionably Sarah Hartford's daughter and James Hartford's granddaughter, which means you are the sole heir to the Hartford estate." My mother's letter mentioned the estate was worth around $800,000. Mr. Whitmore smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "That was the value in 2003. The trust has been professionally managed for over 2 decades. With conservative investments and accumulated interest, the current value is approximately $2.4 million. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. $2.4 million? Plus the land, he continued. 70 acres on County Road 47. The farmhouse is gone, but the barn is still standing, and the land itself has appreciated considerably. In Vermont's current real estate market, that property is worth at least another $600,000, possibly more. Altogether, you're looking at inheriting somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. $3 million. I'd left the orphanage 3 weeks ago with $47 in my pocket. I'd been sleeping in shelters and scraping together money for food. And now this man was telling me I was a millionaire. "There will be some paperwork, of course," Mr. Whitmore was saying. "We'll need to go through probate, file the proper claims, but with the documentation you've provided, it should be straightforward. I'd estimate it will take about 60 to 90 days to process everything, and then the funds will be released to you." "What do I do until then?" I asked. The question came out smaller than I intended. "I don't have anywhere to live. I don't have any money." Mr. Whitmore's expression softened. "The trust has provisions for exactly this situation. I can authorize an immediate distribution of $25,000 for living expenses while we process the claim. That should be more than enough to get you settled. And Emma, if I may make a suggestion, Brookfield is a good town. Your family has deep roots here. You might consider staying, at least for a while. Get to know the place where your mother grew up, where your grandparents built their life." I walked out of Robert Whitmore's office 2 hours later with a check for $25,000 in my hand and a folder full of paperwork that would change my life forever. Maggie was waiting for me in her truck, and when I showed her the check, she actually screamed and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "What are you going to do first?" she asked as we drove back through town. "I need a place to stay," I said, "and then I need to figure out what comes next." Maggie took me to a small bed and breakfast run by her sister, a cozy place called the Maple Inn, with rooms that overlooked the mountains. She convinced her sister to give me the monthly rate, and I paid for 3 months up front, which still only cost me a fraction of what I had. It felt surreal, having money in my pocket, knowing I could afford to eat real meals and sleep in a real bed without worrying about whether I'd be able to pay for it. Over the next few weeks, as Mr. Whitmore processed the paperwork for my inheritance, I did something I'd never been able to do before. I got to know a place. I walked through Brookfield every day, exploring the town where my mother had grown up. I ate breakfast at Maggie's cafe every morning, and she introduced me to people, telling them I was Sarah Hartford's daughter, James Hartford's granddaughter. The older residents remembered my grandparents, and they told me stories that made them come alive in my mind. "Your grandfather built my house," one man told me. "This was back in 1982. I was a young teacher, barely making enough to get by, and every other contractor wanted to charge me prices I couldn't afford. James gave me a fair price and even let me pay in installments, said everyone deserved a decent place to raise their family. Your grandmother was my English teacher, a woman said. She's the reason I went to college. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself and pushed me to apply for scholarships. She even helped me write my application essays. When I got accepted, she cried like I was her own daughter. Every story made me proud of people I'd never met and sad for all the years we'd lost. But it also made me feel connected to something bigger than myself. I had roots now. I had history. I came from somewhere, and that somewhere was good. I spent a lot of time at the barn, too. I brought all the boxes down from the loft and went through them systematically, reading every journal, looking at every photograph, piecing together my mother's life. I learned about her dreams of becoming an actress, her love of Shakespeare, her favorite foods and colors and songs. I learned about her struggles with depression after she gave me up, her attempts to build a life for herself despite the guilt that haunted her. In one journal from 1997, she wrote, "I saw a girl today who looked about 6 years old, and for a moment I thought it might be Emma. I followed her for 2 blocks before I realized how crazy I was being. Emma could be anywhere. She could look like anything. I don't even know if she's still in Portland or if she was adopted and moved away. I don't know anything about my own daughter's life, and it's killing me." Reading those words, I felt the anger I'd carried for so long begin to soften. My mother hadn't abandoned me because she didn't care. She'd abandoned me because she was young and scared and thought she was doing the right thing. She'd spent the rest of her life regretting that choice, thinking about me, loving me from a distance. It didn't erase the pain of growing up without parents, but it helped me understand that she'd been in pain too. On a sunny day in May, exactly 63 days after I first walked into Robert Whitmore's office, he called to tell me the inheritance had been finalized. $3.2 million had been deposited into a bank account in my name. The property on County Road 47 was officially mine. Everything my grandfather had built, everything my mother had wanted me to have, was now mine to do with as I wished. I sat in my room at the Maple Inn that night, staring at the bank statement on my laptop screen, and I thought about what my mother had written in her letter. Live the life I couldn't live. Be brave in ways I wasn't brave. Take this inheritance and build something beautiful with it. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Over the next 6 months, I threw myself into a project that felt like it was meant to be. I hired contractors to restore the barn on County Road 47, not to its original purpose as a farm building, but into something new. I turned it into a community center, a place for young people who felt lost or alone or like they didn't belong anywhere. The main floor became a large open space with couches and tables, a kitchen area, computers and books. The loft where my mother had hidden became a quiet reading room with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. I called it the Hartford House, in memory of my mother and grandparents. It opened in November, just over 8 months after I'd first arrived in Brookfield with nothing but a rusty key and hope. We offered after-school programs for kids, a free meal program, tutoring, counseling services, and just a safe space for anyone who needed it. Maggie volunteered to run the kitchen, making sure there was always hot food available. Mr. Whitmore helped me set up a scholarship fund for young people who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. Other people in town volunteered their time and skills, teaching art classes, music lessons, helping kids with homework. On opening day, standing in the restored barn surrounded by people who had welcomed me and helped me and become my family, I felt my mother's presence. I wore her locket around my neck, carrying my grandparents close to my heart. And I knew, somehow, that she would be proud of what I'd built from the inheritance she'd left me. A reporter from the local newspaper came to cover the opening, and she asked me why I'd chosen to spend my inheritance this way instead of just keeping it for myself. Because I grew up in an orphanage, I told her. I know what it's like to feel like nobody cares about you, like you don't matter, like you're all alone in the world. And I know how much it would have meant to me if I'd had a place like this, where people showed up for me and told me I was worth something. My mother couldn't be there for me when I was growing up, but she made sure I'd have the resources to be there for other kids who need it. This is how I honor her memory. This is how I make sure her life meant something. The article ran with a photo of me standing in front of the barn, and the headline read, "From Orphan to Philanthropist, How One Woman's Inheritance Became a Community's Gift." But it wasn't really about the money or the building or even the programs we offered. It was about connection. It was about taking the broken pieces of my story and my mother's story and my grandparents' story and creating something whole from them. It was about understanding that even when people make mistakes, even when they hurt us or let us down, there can still be love underneath it all. I still have hard days. I still grieve for the mother I never got to know and the grandparents who died before I could meet them. I still feel angry sometimes about the years I spent alone, wondering where I came from and if anyone cared that I existed. But I also have good days now. Days when a kid comes into the Hartford house looking lost and leaves with a smile. Days when I walk through Brookfield and people greet me by name, asking how I'm doing, telling me they're proud of what I've built. Days when I sit in the loft of the barn with my mother's journals and feel connected to her across the years and the silence. I found more than an inheritance in that barn. I found my story. I found out where I came from and who my people were. I found purpose and meaning in taking what I'd been given and using it to help others who were struggling the way I'd struggled. That rusty key I carried from Portland to Brookfield didn't just open a barn door. It opened a pathway to understanding, to healing, to building a life that mattered. My mother left me more than money. She left me a legacy of love, imperfect and complicated and real. And every day, I try to live up to that legacy. I try to be brave in ways she wasn't brave. I try to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. I try to show up for people the way I wish someone had shown up for me. Because in the end, that's what inheritance really means. It's not just about money or property. It's about taking what you've been given, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain, and deciding what you're going to do with it. It's about honoring the people who came before you by living a life that would make them proud. I left the orphanage with nothing, but an old barn key changed my whole life. Not because of the money it led me to, but because of the truth it revealed. I wasn't alone. I never had been. I came from people who loved me, even if they couldn't always show it the way I needed them to. And now, I get to carry that love forward, sharing it with others who need it just as desperately as I once did. My name is Emma Hartford. I'm 24 years old, and I finally know where I belong. Thank you so much for taking this journey with Emma. Her story touched my heart, and I hope it touched yours too. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, I would absolutely love it if you'd hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of people who believe in second chances, who understand that everyone has a story worth telling, and who aren't afraid to share their own experiences with honesty and vulnerability. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about your past that changed how you saw yourself? Have you ever been given a gift that came with unexpected responsibilities? Or maybe you've experienced the kind of loneliness Emma felt and you found your way through it? Share your story below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And here's my question for you. What did you learn from Emma's story? Was it about forgiveness? About the courage it takes to face your past? About using what you've been given to help others? Drop a comment and let me know, because I genuinely want to know what resonated with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, no matter where you came from or what you've been through, your story matters. You matter. Don't ever forget that.